Blockbuster U.S. antitrust lawsuit targets Apple's iPhone monopoly. The Department of Justice and 16 state attorneys. Who's throwing their cursor around in the Google Docs? They got to read this thing.
I guarantee you it's Lewis.
What?
The
Don't
Department of
deny it,
Justice
Lewis.
and 16 state attorneys general filed an antitrust lawsuit Thursday aimed at forcing Apple to open up many aspects of its ecosystem, from the App Store to the Apple Watch. The suit, which accuses Apple of wielding monopoly-like power, could bring truly sweeping changes to iPhone, Mac, and other Apple computers. The DOJ explicitly targets the iPhone, calling the device key to Apple's dominance of a wide variety of industries. The suit accuses Apple of engaging in, quote, anti-competitive and exclusionary conduct, and seeks to restore competition that would lower smartphone prices, reducing developer fees, and preserve, quote, innovation for the future. The DOJ cited the lack of an Android app to synchronize with Apple Watch as an example of Cupertino's anti-competitive behavior, and it accused the iPhone maker of stifling what it calls super apps. The Department of Justice said, quote, Apple has disrupted the growth of apps with broad functionality that would make it easier for consumers to switch between competing smartphone platforms. It gave no examples of these, though. The iPhone maker's refusal to allow other payment systems access to iPhone's tap-to-pay system also came under fire, quote, inhibiting the creation of cross-platform third-party digital wallets, according to the Justice Department. In addition, regulators object to an Apple policy that blocked cloud gaming services from the App Store. That might explain why Apple reversed this rule earlier this year.
I think they have been trying to prevent this for some time now.
Yeah. iMessage also came up with the Justice Department alleging Apple has made the quality of cross-platform messaging worse, less innovative, and less secure for users, so its customers have to keep buying iPhones. That I have a hard time believing, but I'm getting ahead of myself here.
I think the exact opposite is actually true, and I think the government hates them for it.
It's just been held back by the fact that SMS is a terrible standard. And you know what? Apple is already adopting RCS next year, and they've announced that in advance, so whatever. Moving on, the Justice Department's lawsuit is seeking an unspecified financial penalty. It also wants the court to order Apple to open up messages, which Apple, quote, undermines with blue bubbles on Android. Allow cloud streaming apps and alternative digital wallets with direct NFC access and more. In Epic Games' 2020 lawsuit over App Store restrictions, Apple successfully argued that the App Store greatly benefited users by protecting against malware and fraud. Apple also argued that the App Store doesn't lock in consumers who could easily switch between iPhone and Android. So the crux of this case that I think the Department of Justice is going to have a hard time justifying is that at the core of this, Apple isn't a monopoly. The U.S. is their strongest market, and they only have a 55% share. If you read through their document, at some points they try to carve out like a very niche market so that they can define Apple as being a monopoly, saying that if you add in Apple and Samsung, which doesn't make sense, Samsung is a competitor. If you add them both together and you only look at the smartphone market over $700, which is supposedly a completely different market, then they combined have 90% share, which it's like saying, oh, Cult of Mac has a monopoly on Apple tech journalism if you only consider independent blogs and you add us together with 9 to 5 Mac and Mac Rumors. Like,
that's what I think about that. Sorry. Yeah, they're being very specific in their definition, and I don't think that the definition meets the true definition of a monopoly, as you just said.
Like
and there are other ecosystems that you could go to. Now, I think that some of their points are actually legitimate, although I don't know if these things that they do are illegal, such as locking everyone else out of their NFC functionality.
Like, that's a legitimate security concern. Like, the Apple Wallet only has access to that because all of that payment information is stored in the secure enclave, and Apple doesn't want anybody else to access that.
Although they are starting to open that up a little bit, so I don't know if there are ways that they could do that to make things more secure. It's hard to know where the line is, right? Like, I get Apple's argument that they are trying to keep things closed because they don't want to... Well, they want to keep you safe and they want to keep their devices secure. Like, I get that, and I think there probably is a element of truth to that. But we also know that it's very convenient that Apple doesn't allow some things, and there's certainly going to be some kind of financial motive involved. And I think the App Store is just such a perfect example of that. Like, not letting you install apps outside of the App Store like you can on the Mac. I always use this example because I just feel like it's just absolutely bulletproof. It's like, dude, they let you install apps on the Mac from anywhere. And then they say that they can allow that on the iPhone because then the iPhone wouldn't be secure. Well, is the Mac not secure? Because I thought the Mac was secure. So which is it? Like you're talking out of both sides of your mouth here. And clearly, I think their motivation is because they want to make every single dollar that they can from the App Store. And I think more than anything else, what I think is interesting about this lawsuit, whether or not they win, is Apple is under siege. I mean, this is happening in Europe. We had been talking about this happening here in the US. Now it is.